So this week's film was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It's one of those classic tales where from the 80s, from directed by Spielberg, as we all seen, we and some of us knew beforehand. Alien falls in the sky. The child finds it. They become friends. Eventually, the alien needs to get back. E.T. needs to phone home and whatnot, and it goes on from there. And it, as Adam said during the lecture, is one of those classic films that you just want to bring down and sit one, sort of pat himself on the back for saying that. Oh, in case you haven't watched this film, I'm glad because now I made you. I'm one of those people. I'd never watched ET before, so it was a nice little new experience for me. But it's a nice movie, and just watching it for the first time and looking at it with all the readings, I thought to myself, well, this is the closest of any film that we've watched that we've gone to an actual pretty literal interpretation of a vegetation king. And I say this because from the beginning of the film we see that E.T., as he was named by the kids, was botanist. Him and his kind came, they started collecting plants. And as we see throughout the film, E.T. actually has influences on vegetation. He saw a dead plant at the children's home, and he actually brought it back. And we see that he has this deep connection with vegetation. And as the movie progresses, E.T. starts becoming sick, um, perhaps from his time away from his home, not used to Earth. He needs to go back home. But you see, he starts becoming sick, and as he becomes sick, the flower that he rejuvenated actually becomes becoming sick itself. And this sickness of the vegetation king, the vegetation god, also once again translating with the vegetation, there with both their health decline. When the health of the king declines, the health of the vegetation decline, and it got to the point where ET's health reached the point where he died. He flatlined. He was dead, and the plant which he had rejuvenated was dead as well. So we had this death of the vegetation king. They had become ill. We need to get rid of it, and it needs to be replaced. But instead of following the normal pattern we've been following with Frasier and whatnot of the Vegetation King, the movie went with the James interpretation of the instead of replacing the king, we rejuvenate the king through the ritual. So instead of the kids finding a new ET to play with, ET actually comes back from to life. His chest starts glowing. He sees his friends are nearby. It's a nice little happy moment. It's like, oh, ET's not dead. But the ET, the Vegetation King, in this sense, is actually rejuvenated. The plant comes back to life, and they've completed the cycle. So that was the most literal interpretation of the Vegetation King that I've actually seen in any of these films. But there's also other things to discuss with this film. As was mentioned in the lectures, there was the interpretation of aliens in movies in general during this time, or early on in the fears of invasion, as was discussed in the lecture. ET was not an invading alien. This was more of a, we're gonna change the tone of how it is. We're not gonna use aliens as an invasion gimmick. We're not gonna use them as Russians, Nazis, whatever it might be. They're not gonna be things we're scared of at night. Instead, more of a criticism on humans. As the movie was going on, it was a criticism like, no, we have to hide it from the adults. We have to hide it from the adults. Only the kids can know, because the child brought in his brother and his little sister into the group, and they didn't want to tell their mother. They just keep it away from the adults. It was a criticism in that case, and a criticism against science, because once the scientists knew, yeah, the child was so afraid of everybody knowing about ET. He's like, oh, if they know about ET, they're gonna dissect him. They're gonna do horrible things to him. And when the scientists do find out, they trap him in a little bubble in the house. They take authority. They do whatever they want. They do whatever. And as they're trying, we as adults, we're seeing, well, it makes sense. If there's an alien, you have to. But the kids are the criticism. And as the scientists are trying to bring ET back to life, you still, no, you're killing them. It's a whole criticism. Whereas we're adults, it's like, it's perfectly fine. But adults are the ones that are being criticized here. Like, uh, there are things that adults are going on with their lives that, like, they think it's right, but when you take it from the another perspective, when you look at it, it's like what you think is right is perhaps not the correct way, not the way it should be done. And you can see it as a little criticism, like the way you've been interpreting aliens, the way like you've been using them. Like they don't always have to be an invasion force. They can be benevolent. So it can be seen as that one little criticism, or it can be as an overarching criticism against adults. Like the way that you believe is not necessarily always the right way. But apart from that, there was also a nice little hero's journey. Whereas E.T. was the vegetation god, the child in the movie was actually the hero, and he had his little hero's journey, and we can actually go through it. We're introduced to him first with where his brother and the brother's friends are all playing a game, and they're bullying him because they don't want to put him in the game. They send him to go get pizza. That's just the ordinary world, and he gets his call to adventure when he first finds E.T. in the little shed. He finds it. He tries it, and he throws a ball in there, and then that's where we get the refuse the call. He's scared. Something's in there. He runs away, and then he has his meeting with a mentor when he finally does meet E.T. for the first time. He's there, and he crosses the threshold when he decides, well, I've met E.T. Let me try and get him into my world, and he gets him into his room, and starts communicating with him and starts interacting with ET. And throughout this, he acquires his allies by including his siblings into this little cause. And well, like, here's ET, help me guys, this is the deal. You're gonna help me. And they go ahead, and they have the ordeal of ET's trying to get home, and they have to hide ET, and they have to keep him secret while at the same time helping him. And they deal with the ordeal by putting him in a basket, going out, trying to communicate, doing whatnot, and they move forward, and then they have to go through the whole going the road back. The hero has to go road back. This was seen when the child had to go back home, but they also have to communicate. You see the nice little scene in the moon. Oh wow, that's the road back to home. Never got home. Eventually got home, but that's another point. And then you go through the resurrection. This part not so much from the hero, but from E.T. E.T.'s resurrected. They move on. They continue, and E.T. takes the part at the very end of the hero where the child did most of the hero's quest, but at the end, E.T.'s resurrected, and E.T. returns home, has his own road back home. He returns home with his plan, what essentially he came for. So we have not only the Vegetation King and a sort of a critique of humans, but we also have the hero's journey throughout E.T. And as for the cinematography, it was interesting choice. Keep E.T. Once again, this is mostly practical effects. You keep E.T. in darkness, keep him hidden, so you only have to show little certain things. And there was a nice little tidbit there, and we know that that this world has the folklore of aliens. We know it's not closed off because in one of the shots, probably a little after, since Spielberg is friends of Lucas, we see a Yoda mask. So we know this world has the folklore of aliens. We know they have their perception of aliens, where they're out there, they're doing their things. But to see that the characters have to have this perception of the folklore, how it is, how aliens really are, and how it goes, and then to actually experience it for real, to see the three-dimensional reality, as E.O. James would put it, three-dimensional reality of this is actually happening. This is not just a story. Now we're being confronted by it. That was a little interesting to see how everyone reacted. Everyone, of course, was completely shocked, surprised, and in awe of, wow, we had this story, we had this folklore of aliens, now it's really happening. So that was also a nice little interesting bit. So a very good movie. I'm actually very glad I watched it, and a lot to take in from it. Yeah.